Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to Theology Unleashed. I am your host and the moderator for this debate, Josh Wolf, and my camera is not working right now, which is why you're seeing the OBS virtual cam. So just give me one moment to fix that. Today we have Varaha Prabhu from Africa and TJump from America, the United States, joining us. They'll be with us in 1 second. They're just in the waiting room while I just get my camera together. Let's have a look here. Let me try restarting this and see what this does. The magic of modern technology. Amazing when it works and a real PITA when it doesn't. See if we can get this to go. Camera. How very strange. Well, you know what? Maybe you don't need to see me. I'm not that important anyway. The main thing here are our two guests for our debate today, which is on the topic of, does God exist? So let me bring them into the stream. See if we can do this. Good evening, Varaha Prabhu.
Good evening, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, live from Togo in the continent of Africa, the cradle of human civilization. Welcome.
Thank you.
Sorry,
I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, sorry that you can't see me at the moment. There seems to be some problem with my... Okay, maybe I do have to bring myself back into the stream to be able to be heard. Can you hear me, Varaha Prabhu?
I'm hearing you. Perfectly.
You're hearing me. Okay, great. And TJump, are you there?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Oh, fantastic. Okay, well, what an amazing picture this is. I can see Varaha Prabhu there in Togo. I can see a GoPro webcam kind of preview for myself and a nice Theology Unleashed logo and a black screen for you, TJump.
Huh.
Yes, you're correct.
There we go.
Yeah. Oh, look at that.
Fun.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Now, what I'm going to do for myself is I'm going to put this Theology Unleashed thing like this. And since my live camera is not working, you're going to have to go with a recent picture of me winning a bronze medal at a bodybuilding competition. You're welcome. So that's going to be my picture for today. But enough about me.
Great.
To our speakers for today's debate. Let's start with Varaha Prabhu from Africa. Varaha Prabhu, also known as Sriman Varaha Acharya, is a spiritual leader in the Hare Krishna movement, which he joined in 1982 after quitting his law career. He's opened many spiritual centers in the West African region where he's based. And he's currently the director of Centre Culturel Vedic. I think I got that right. It looks like it's French. And Vedic Life Order in both Francophone and Anglophone countries in Africa. He also runs a Vedic library service that is translating the Vedas into African languages. He just finished publishing the Bhagavad Gita in Yoruba, which he personally translated. He's overseeing the translation into other languages as well. To our other speaker for today's debate, TJump. He's a famous atheist YouTuber who is focused on debunking arguments for the existence of God, and he's written a book on epistemology, which he is in negotiations with a large publisher to get it out there to the people. Welcome, gentlemen, to the debate, Does God Exist?
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for
I'm
having
happy
me
to
on.
be here.
So for our format for the debate today, we have opening statements and then kind of like a to and fro informal discussion. And Arjuna said to me, there's no need to be like super rigorous on the timing of the opening statements, but, don't let it like go on for, more than 15 or 20 minutes. And for this debate, does God exist? Sriman Varaha Prabhu, who is taking the affirmative position on this question, is going to begin with the opening statement. So I'll now hand the microphone over to you, Sriman Varaha Prabhu, for the question, does God exist?
Thank you, Josh. I'm really glad to be here tonight. Because I'm a theist. I believe in God and believe in the existence of God. And I know that God exists. So I'm going to start with a prayer or a meditation because that is the culture of religious which I am. So permit me to do a little meditation before we start or before I start my explanations. I was born in the darkest region of ignorance, and my spiritual master, His Divine Grace, Sripad Bhaktivedanta Swami Krishnapad, opened my eyes with a touch of knowledge. I therefore offer my respectful obeisances unto Him. Mukam karoti vashalam pangum langayate girim yirpata daham bande se guru dinotarinam. I offer my respectful obeisances unto my spiritual master. His mercy turns the dumb into an eloquent speaker and enables the lame to cross mountains. Satuma Sadgamaya, Tamasuma Jyoti Gamaya, Amritam Gamaya, Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. O Lord, keep me not in the phenomenal world of unreality, but make me go towards the reality of eternal self. Lead me, O Lord, from darkness to light, and from mortality into immortality of self-realization. May peace be profound. Hare Krishna. That is my first meditation, and I like to do another meditation on God Himself, respect to God. Oh my Lord, oh all personality of Godhead, I offer my respectful obeisances unto you. I meditate upon Lord Sri Krishna because He is the absolute truth and the primeval cause of all causes of the creation, sustenance, and destruction of the manifested universes. He is directly and indirectly conscious of manifestations, and He is independent because there is no other cause beyond Him. It is He only who first imparted the Vedic knowledge unto the art of Brahmaji, the original living being. By Him, the great sages and demigods are placed into illusion, as one is bewildered by the illusory representations of water seen in fire or land seen on water. Only because of Him do the material universes temporarily manifested by the sense of the three modes of nature appear to be factual, although they are unreal. I therefore meditate on him, Lord Sri Krishna, who is eternally existing in the transcendental abode, which is forever free from the illusory representation of the material world. I meditate on him, for it is the absolute truth. So I finish my meditation, recognizing the existence of God and offering him my prostrated, humble respects. Now, to start, we learned from authorities that those who are seer truth have concluded that of the non-existent there is no endurance, and of the eternal there is no cessation. They have concluded this by studying the nature of both. The word existent and non-existent refer only to spirit and matter. That is the version of all seers of the truth. This is the beginning of the instruction to human beings who are bewildered by the influence of ignorance. One can understand the nature of God by thorough study of oneself. The difference between oneself and God being understood as the relationship between the part and the whole. So the life of the part is insignificant. In fact, it is used as long as it is not connected to the whole. So that means that God is not only spirit, but is also everything that we see around us. The air that we breathe, the water that we drink, the light that lights our path, everything, the vegetation, everything is also a manifestation of God. So in order to understand God, we have to go first by the elements, by things that we can see, the life-sustaining elements around us. We have to understand that first. And we have to also understand who we are, because it is by thorough study of oneself that one can understand the nature of God. So as we see, all the material elements are outside of us, they are also present within us. When I talk about material elements, I'm referring to earth, water, heat or fire, the air and ether. These are separated energy of God. And these same energy are within us, and without us, they are us. So we have to understand first the basic thing, these elements, which are life sustaining. Without them, we cannot live. So we have to understand first these elements. And these elements only form our physical being. Because beyond the physical, beyond the material elements, there are also the other elements, the subtle elements, which comprise of mind and the first ego. And above that is the soul, or the spirit soul, which is part of God. So, for instance, if you claim that God does not exist, it's like you're saying that your father does not exist, or your grandfather does not exist. Probably you know your father, but you may probably not know your grandfather, or you may not know your great grandfather. So the great grandfather is God, because everything has its cause. And when you go back to the original cause, what causes itself, that is what we call God. That is God. So anyway, stop here, and then let my friend Tom respond, and then we can take on from there.
Epic. Thank you, Varaha. I'm here. I got my camera to work in the interim. Now, Varaha Prabhu, could I ask you please to mute your microphone in this next segment here, because we are picking up some background noise from the environment there in Togo.
Okay.
If you could do that, that would be great, just so that we can get like a pristine sound. Awesome. Okay, great. So that was just over 7 minutes there for Varaha Prabhu's opening statement, well inside the allocated time.
I did.
We're still hearing the sound from your microphone. Is there any way I can mute it in Restream? Now, I could take you out of the stream. No, here we go. I can mute it. I've done it. There we go. I'd like to keep you in there so we can see your responses to TJump's statements. It was great watching him while you were speaking, and people really enjoy that. So, TJump, over to you for your opening statement.
Yeah, so the question, does God exist? It's a question of any kind of epistemological question. How do we tell if this claim is real or imaginary? If it's just imaginary, like many things, then there's no reason to believe it's true about the world. You have lots of different things that we can imagine are the case that are not true about the world, like fairies, leprechauns, magic, miracles, mythical creatures, all kinds of things. Klingons, Star Trek, Star Wars, we imagine lots of things. And so when we're asking if a God is real, if it's part of the real world, then we're trying to determine if it's one of the imaginary things or one of the real things. And so to do that, you need some kind of a methodology to show, is God one of the real things or one of the imaginary things? To do that, you need some general methodology that can differentiate between real and imaginary. And the way we do that is science. Science gives us a way to differentiate between the two. It's novel, testable predictions. So for example, if I see a cup fall over and I want to say the cup, there could be infinitely new things that could have knocked over the cup. Maybe it was the wind or a squirrel or a bird or aliens or God or leprechauns, whatever. And so in order to say which one actually did knock over the cup, you need to say, if my theory is true, like if I said it was knocked over by a squirrel, then I need to say, if my theory is true, we will be able to look around the cup and see squirrel droppings. And if we can look around the cup and see squirrel droppings, then we know that my theory is true. It was the one that explained the data the best because it made novel, testable predictions. And all the other ones were imaginary. The same thing applies to a God. So when you say, what created the universe, what created everything, that could be just nature, just a part of nature, just energy and matter and motion, no God, no consciousness, no intentionality, no personhood, just energy, just nature and nothing more. And just like the scientists kind of a God, a naturalistic universe and nothing more. And so if you want to say that there is actually a God there, like Hare Krishna or Jesus or Muhammad or whoever, you need to show that your hypothesis is real and not one of the imaginary ones. In order to do that, you need novel, testable predictions. All of the evidence we have right now just indicates the natural universe and nothing more. Everything can be explained just as matter and energy and motion. There is no soul. There is no spirit. There is no magic outside of the universe. There's no God. There's no intentionality. It's all just made up in human heads. And the only thing that really exists is nature, just energy and matter and nothing more. And everything that we envision as a God is just something made up in our heads. That's what the evidence indicates. So unless you have some way to differentiate imagination from reality to show that your kind of a God exists, it's reasonable to conclude that your God is imaginary. And I will conclude there.
Okay, very brief and to the point opening statement there. Thank you, TJump. So now, we don't have really a structure for this. So it's just really an opportunity for each of you to respond to each other's points and, make any further points that you wanted to do. So I'm going to bring your microphone back online, Varaha Prabhu, to respond to TJump's opening statement and any questions you might have for him. And I've unmuted you at this end. You're on.
Okay. It's nice to hear Tom speaking about nature being the cause of the universe. And he also wants us to show that our hypothesis is not imaginary. Okay, first and foremost, when you say that nature is the cause of the universe, what do you mean by nature? I've just explained that the material elements, are actually the separated energy of God. That is, and then of course, when you talk about nature is subjective. nature is feminine. It belongs to somebody. You say my nature, your nature. So nature is not independent. I think you have to go back into your etymology and try to understand the natural order of things. So when you're talking about nature, you have to understand that nature is not independent. Nature never stands alone. It's always, it belongs to somebody. It's subjective. Okay. Now another point is whether it's real, what our definition of God or what we say about God is real or it is imaginary, because we imagine many things. Now, first is that I like to know uh, what is your definition of reality? The example you've given about what you can see to be able to come to conclusion, I kind of wonder why you're putting so much importance on what you can see. Your senses are imperfect, and you have the tendency to make mistakes. You have all the four defects of human being. You have the propensity to cheat and to be cheated, and you can be illusioned. You can take a rope for snake and at night, and you can many. You say you see. So what is this? Your power, the power of your sight, which is so limited. And if you want to base human on what you can see, that is very, very unfortunate, because there's a lot of things you cannot see. I just ask you right now, did your forefather exist? Did your great grandfather exist? You can't see him. So will you tell me because I can't see him, he does not exist? You answer that. Can you answer that? Because you cannot see
Sure.
your great grandfather.
I can see my great
Does,
grandfather. I can
does,
see pictures of him.
does he
I can
exist?
see,
Does he
I
exist?
can see he did exist. So I can see pictures of him. I can see his genetic makeup. I can do a genetic analysis of my DNA to know that he existed. I can know exactly his race and his origin. I can know how old he was. I can know where he died. So yeah, he definitely existed. I can show he wasn't imaginary. I'm not trusting my senses here. I'm trusting the things we can determine are not imaginary. Like some of our senses can be imaginary. We can have delusions, hallucinations, illusions. All those kinds of things are imaginary. So those are not what I'm trusting. What I'm trusting is science, novel, testable predictions. That can show the difference between imagination, whether it's sensory imagination or just something we imagine in our heads. It can show those are false and show which things are not imaginary. So I'm not just trusting the senses here. Fire, earth, air, and water, those elements aren't real. Those are combinations of types of energy. Energy, matter, and motion, the electromagnetic field, the strong, weak, and nuclear forces, those are electromagnetism. Those are what produce fire, earth, air, and water. Fire, earth, air, and water aren't actually elements. They don't actually exist in the universe independently of energy. But nature can have its own nature. Nature doesn't need to be owned by anybody. Like no one owns Venus. Venus is just there. It doesn't own. No one owns it. It can exist on its own. It can have its own nature and be independent of a god. There's no need for an owner at all. I don't know why you would think it does.
My earlier submission, I did say in order to understand God, one has to do a thorough study of himself, because we are part of the universe. We are part of God. So first is we have to understand who you. Now you told me that you can understand your forefather existed because you saw pictures, you had some information. So you actually believe that history is a systemic a method of knowing the truth, because you rightly mentioned that you knew that your father and father existed because you saw a picture, could also be imaginary, but you accepted the information from whoever showed you that picture, that was your great grandfather. You didn't need any scientific proof. You said, okay, you can do DNA, etc. But first you accept that information just based on the fact that somebody you trusted is telling you this. So that is where science is less in being able to give us an absolute truth. Science has gone wrong many times. So how can we depend wholly on science? There's many statements made by science, and many times which had been revised and been changed from time to time. Science books are changing, are undergoing changes. So that is not absolute truth, but the truth about God which I write, the seers of the truth, they have concluded that of the non-existent, there is no endurance, and of the eternal sensation. You understand that? What is eternal is always nature that you're talking about. We have evidence here, and going through seasonal changes from time immemorial. But whatever your scientific evidence are showing, and most of the time trying to repeat what is already there factually. First, understand that your method of finding out the truth is actually defective, because science is most of the time based on a priori or a posteriori, which is inference and deduction. But there is an higher method, a better method, which is based on authority. How do you know it's your mom? How do you know it's your father? Did you go about doing DNA tests before you conclude who is your father? You simply accept the word of your mother, and you still haven't answered my question. I ask you, who are you, Mr. Tom? Can you simply tell me who are you? Because by the study of yourself, knowing who you are before you can know your origin, you have to understand who you are first. Who are you, Mr. Tom? Can you answer my question?
Yeah, I am myself. That is the answer. But yeah, we do. The authority isn't trusted. Science doesn't care about authority. Authority is useless for evidence because authorities are always wrong. Their authorities are completely useless as a way of evidence. Science is the most reliable way to determine truth. Authorities.
So, did you use science? Did you use science to decide who is your mother? Your mother is your authority in the fact of who is your father. Did you use science to decide who is your father?
Yes, with DNA testing.
You say authority is wrong, always useless, but your mother is the authority on the fact of who is your father. Did you consult science before you know who is your father?
Yes, science is right. My mother is wrong. If science says my father is somebody else, science is right. My mother's opinion doesn't matter. So science is the one who gets to tell me who my father is.
That's interesting. But how many people go by this your science?
How many people go by
Let's
it?
go back. Let's go back. Okay, you said that you are yourself. So please, I'm seeing your body here, a grown-up man, American body. Which better way would you describe yourself? I would like to know. American, a man, a scholar.
I am thoughts. I am consciousness. I exist. I think, therefore I am. That's how I would describe myself.
It's interesting that you say your consciousness, because originally I thought you were trying to deny consciousness. But if you even your consciousness, I thought I heard you saying that. But it's good. I'm happy that you say your consciousness. So if you are conscious, then you have to try to understand, where does that consciousness come from? Because when we're talking about consciousness, can I just explain a little bit? When we're talking about consciousness, you have consciousness, you have subconscious, and you have super consciousness. Do you agree to this?
I agree. There is subconsciousness, there is conscious, and there is unconscious. Those are all parts of the brain.
There is super consciousness.
I don't know what super consciousness is.
Super consciousness is an aggregate of extrasensory perception. When we go beyond our senses to perceive what certain reality which are not visible, that's super consciousness. We're talking about intuition here. We're talking about certain faculties which men have had experiences which show us that there is another consciousness beyond what we can see. So that is what is called super consciousness. I hope you agree to that.
No, in science that's called subconscious. That's just the lower parts of your brain you don't have conscious access to. There's nothing super about it. It's just, again, part of your brain.
So intuition does not exist?
Intuition is a subconscious process of the brain. So it's like just less conscious than your normal consciousness. It's not super anything.
Well, if it is not super, how come that historians and philosophers have given so much credence to the fact that this intuition has helped many a time to resolve many difficult puzzles? That couldn't be sub. It could only be super and supra.
So
and not only that. Now, just hold on. because these are semantics, but it takes an average person to understand that whatever you cannot figure out in your conscious level, that it is a super consciousness that takes you to that, not subconsciousness. Subconsciousness is when you are down asleep or you are not even functioning properly. Okay,
Well, that's
now
unconscious.
another question.
Let's Varaha Prabhu, let's just complete this point here and give Tom the opportunity to respond to this idea of super consciousness that you've introduced here. Let's clarify this one point.
So
Well, I could just pick up right there. So he mentioned that intuition is something that we use to solve big problems. Like, no, intuition fails in every way to solve any real problems. That's why we never use it in science. We say intuition is a good way to come up with ideas, but it fails completely to actually solve any problems. We need to test things independently of our intuitions to show they're actually real, because our intuition can get things wrong always. Like every single fallacy, biasy intuition that indicates these things are false. We know there's thousands of problems with intuitions, and we know they fail like all the time. So we have to filter those out to leave what's true, not use them.
I take your word for it, because what we call extrasensory perception is when man is able to go beyond his faculties to be able to access certain truths. In fact, the fact that God exists. Now I'll give you an example. Very nice, because excuse me to say, you have to understand that experience is the better judgment. Experience reveals many things, and before we go into that, I think must be some educated person who had some degree in school, and before you come about that mentor who assess your ability and then say that yes, he's now he has diploma or degree in this subject. So this is what we call authority. Without authority, you cannot hold on or claim to be something in any field of education. So if in a mundane field of education, some authority has to give you some credence and give you some degree, and basically you claim to be an education, how much more in matters concerning God, spirituality, and you think that you only have to decide that by yourself. So that is a fact, because every other domain of education, of knowledge, you submit to somebody to clarify and to give credence to what you know in that area. But then you cannot say that the realm of spirit and spirituality, that has to be based on our your guesswork. So that is not science. That is actually unscientific, because what is scientific is what we're seeing, that every school of knowledge, every domain of knowledge has an authority that teaches what the basic or the standard rudiment of that knowledge, and you're refusing that for spirituality. So that is what I'm saying is really not it's unscientific. Get back to intuition. You want a proof. You want to understand.
I gotta address that point. So,
Yes.
no, that's false. There are many scientists who've never had degrees. You don't need a degree to be a scientist. Degrees are what you use to get a job. They're not about science. Science doesn't care if you have a degree or not. Like, there are many people who dropped out of college, like Michael Faraday, Galileo. Lots of people who just didn't care about education and didn't have the authority. They just discovered things and published papers and then became the authorities. You can just find a list of science historians and educators with no degrees, and there's just a huge list on Wikipedia of all these people who made massive changes who had no degree. You don't need a degree to be a scientist. No one cares about authority. There is no authority in science. Science is based off of the truth, not based off of authority. So I don't know what the point is there. Like, no, we don't need authority. We don't trust authority. In fact, one of the pillars of science is always question authority and try to figure out what's true. Like, many of the most significant advances in science came from rejecting authority. Like Galileo's idea that the Earth revolved around the sun, not the other way around, was a rejection of the authority at the time. Ptolemy's ideas, Laplace's ideas, Newton's ideas, they were all rejections of the authorities at the time. You don't trust authority because authority is always wrong. And like you mentioned earlier, if the method you're using is wrong a lot, we can't trust it. So we can't trust authorities. But we can trust science because science is right more than anything else.
Can I?
Sure.
Right. Most of what you're saying right now, I also, I can say they are your your belief, and I'm not bound to accept your facts or your statements as facts. Now, let's come to this. First, I ask you who you are, and you simply saying your consciousness, yourself, you're yourself, but you don't know who you are. That's what I believe. Because to know who you are is to know your origin. Like you know your father as a father. So that you cannot say that the authority is wrong. You accept that you have a father or a forefather whom you did not know, you did not see, and you didn't start doing some scientific research to come to that. You simply accept that based on authority. Okay. Now the point I want to address is visible world, and we have the invisible world. And in every culture, in every civilized culture, they understand there are a lot of things that are happening which we have no control, because these things are happening or being forced upon us by the invisible powers. Okay. Now, for instance, if you go by your science, you can only access what you want. You when something, you go for it. That is scientific, I guess. But then now tell me, when you don't want something and it's forced on you, what is that? What is happening? My friend, you don't want to grow old, but you're growing old. You don't want to get sick, but you're getting diseased. And you don't want to die. You do many things to try to avoid dying, but you're dying and you're going to die eventually. Who is forcing this on you? So that is also what that how do you describe that? So the fact that you have things that you have no control over, that means that there are some supernatural forces beyond us. And from time immemorial, in every culture, people who are culturally illiterate, they learn to give reference and worship to these supernatural forces. That's what I told you. Don't even try to understand God, because you're far away from God. You're too tiny. You cannot understand God. Your brain is so small. All your scientific jargons cannot even come closer to understand what is the absolute truth. You're very much, and all the atheists put together, they're very much far away from that truth. You cannot. But at least try to understand what you can see. The Bible
All right.
says, let me
Pick up
finish.
there.
Let me finish this. The Bible says a fool conclude that there is no God because he cannot see from the created things the creator. I give you an example. You see a portrait. When you see a portrait of a very nice, beautiful flower, and then what is your next reaction? You start, oh, this is a nice piece of work. The artist must be very talented. Start glorifying that portrait. Okay, but that portrait of flower is nothing but the original flower in nature, which you are refusing, and you are denying that he has a creator. So is there any sense in that? You're ready to buy a portrait of art, which is just a copy of what is in nature, and you're ready to pay millions of dollars for just an ordinary portrait. But the original thing, you're denying that there is no creator, there's no designer. Where is the logic? Where is the science in this? Answer me.
Yeah, so a few things is you don't need to know your origin to know who you are. That's completely contradictory. Like who you are is determined by your conscious states in the present, not who you originated from the past. Like your past is irrelevant to who you are now. Old age is a result of, again, something we know from science. It's a result of nature, age, disease, and sickness. There are lots of things that we don't have control over. Those are not supernatural things. Those are natural things. Like gravity is something we don't have control over. It affects us, but it isn't supernatural. You don't need a supernatural thing if we just don't have control over it. You've got the natural things we don't have control over, like sickness, disease, and age, which are all things that science has discovered and is trying to treat. You asked about the fine tuning argument. Like there is no fine tuning in a flower. There is fine tuning in a painting because we've seen people paint them. So we know people make paintings because we can see them make them. We've never seen anyone make a flower. We've seen flowers come about by purely natural processes. We can just watch the plant grow from seeds, which come from nutrients in the ground and are given nutrients from the sun. No supernatural designer there. It's just from biology in the ground. We literally watch it happen. And we know the origin of life is pretty much from RNA and DNA forming on clay through natural processes called abiogenesis. No designer there. It's just natural processes. So we know those don't have a designer because we can watch them happen in the world without a designer. We know paintings don't happen without a designer because they don't happen in the world without a designer. You need a designer for them. But life happens all the time, no designer. So not a problem with there. I don't know why you think that would be unreasonable, since we literally see them happening with a no designer. We see flowers grow with no designer all the time.
I just want to let you know, Varaha Prabhu, I just muted your mic during that section because when you're not speaking, there's quite a lot of background noise that's coming through. So I don't know if you can mute it at your end when TJump is speaking, just so that the background noise doesn't come in.
All right.
And you're back on.
Right. You're still trusting so much on what you can see. We can see that flower grows naturally. What can you see? Do you know the process by which the seed turns to a flower? And you say there is no design. Don't you see many different type of flowers, and they're colored, differently? How can you say there's no design? What do you call that? What an artist draws, that is a design. But what God does is not a design. Is that your logic?
There isn't a God, it's just nature. So we can see flowers grow because of natural selection. We can see the different colors form because of the different kinds of chemicals that get bonded inside of the flower due to natural
And
selection.
where do those chemicals come from? Where do those chemicals come from?
Nature.
And this nature is what we call God. What causes itself? That's the understanding you don't have. That which you call that what you call nature is just aspect of God. I told you earlier on that spirit and matter is what is existent and what is not existent. But both of them are in God. From God come. So what you call nature, you're just refusing to acknowledge the authority of God. And that is like being deviant. But that is not being scientific. Because if you actually scientific, to recognize and give credence to whom credence due. If you can honor an artist, an ordinary artist, but you will not honor what is designed by God, then that is being deviant, and that is being very that is not scientific.
No, in science, there's this thing called an argument from authority fallacy, which you say something's true because an authority says so. So we know anytime that happens, that is unscientific because we've named that fallacy. In science, they say this definitely doesn't ever work. You can't ever say the authority says so. That doesn't work. That is actually a fallacy. Like there wasn't a fallacy in anything I said, unless you could name it. I don't, if you know the name of the fallacy, I don't, but there isn't one. So no, like that isn't evidence at all. Like we know scientifically flowers do not have a designer. We know they came about by evolution, by natural selection. We can know the process they came about. We can watch them grow through history. We can find the fossils of how they developed. We know the genetic origin. We can look at their DNA and see which things came before and which after. We know exactly where they fit in life. There is no designer required for any of it. It's to say there was designers just adding in something that's from your imagination and claiming it's real with no evidence. We have no evidence it's designed at all. We have lots of evidence it's just purely natural processes. Saying that, well, it looks really pretty, therefore design, isn't evidence. You need some way to show that your designer isn't imaginary first. And there's no spirit in nature. It's just energy and matter and motion, nothing else. There's no evidence of spirit. So those other aspects that you think are a part of God don't exist. There's no consciousness, no spirit, no soul. It's just energy and matter and motion.
That it's very difficult to wake up somebody who is pretending to be asleep. So if you really don't want to wake up and you want to remain with your set beliefs, no problem. But now let's get one point clear. I asked earlier on about experience forming part of our judgment or our understanding of truth. And I also ask you, I wanted to know what you consider reality. For instance, reality obey certain what you can see, what occupies space and time, and so on. That is your reality. Do you agree with me? Or you have any other of reality beyond what I've just said before I continue?
Yeah, reality is what exists. It doesn't need to occupy space and time. There's definitely things in physics that don't occupy space and time. Space and time are emergent properties of other things that exist prior to space and time, and they're all part of reality. Reality is just the things that exist that are real and non-imaginary. That's what reality is.
All right. Even then, I take your definition. I want to ask you if death is real, because we don't see,
Death or depth?
yeah, death, dying, death,
Yeah. Okay.
dying, death. Is that real?
Yes. Yes.
Or
Yes. Death is
really? Yes, I'm you say that is real because I deny that fact. But the fact is that from all evidence of reality, we don't see it. It just comes upon us. You understand? So you're only accepting it by experience from others, and you know that others die. You haven't died yet, and you don't want to die. But you're telling me, and you're accepting that death is real. And if you accept that death is real, also accepting God. Because in the Vedas, Krishna said that death I am. So if for those who do not accept God as a sentient being, they have to accept death. So if you accept death, that's in one way accepting God also, because you can philosophize as much as you want, and you can deny the reality of God existing as much as you want, but you cannot deny death. You're going to die anytime from now. You're dying every day, and that reality you cannot deny. So accepting death is also accepting God, because that is something you cannot deny.
No, death is just like a rock or a tree. Like they're things that exist in the world. You don't need a god for those things. Death is just the cessation of metabolism in a system to cause it to cease to be able to reproduce cells. Like it's not magical at all. It's just a purely natural process. Saying death is God is like saying that rock or that camera is a god. Clearly not. It's just a part of the material world. There's no need for a god to explain death. It's just a thing that exists in the world.
I already said everything that exists is actually part of God. I've already told you. So even if you say that rock is God or that tree is God, I accept it, because everything in nature actually represents the manifest aspect of God. If you accept death, you're actually accepting God without knowing that you're accepting God, because that's a reality not denied. And that is, Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, the time I am, destroyer. So with time, in the course of time, all your philosophy will be useless, because when death comes, then you seek what shelter? You cannot seek any shelter. And of course, since you do not believe in God, this living experience, so you do not even know what awaits you after death. But it's interesting to know that we have had so many cases of reincarnation, had so many stories of reincarnation, which even not only stories of reincarnation, in the us we have seen cases of near-death experiences of people who are able to come out of the body and see what is happening and report that after coming back into their normal sense. The other time, I wanted to give you an experience of intuition, which are also part of the experiences of the supranormal experiences that we have that help us to understand our being something else or rather than this physical body. I have had so many experiences of intuition many times. So I can give you from my own personal experience. I'd like to know, how do you explain that? One day, are you hearing me? One day,
Yeah.
I was in my office, and I was just taking a nap. Somebody came into my office. I only saw him when he was going out. I woke up at the point when he was stepping out, and I asked him, I simply requested him that I would come back and we can chat. And he said, no, because I saw you sleeping. I I will come back later. You can take your rest. It was about stepping out of the gate. And my mind was telling me, don't let him go. Don't let him go. I don't know for what reason. I have to obey my mind. And I said, please, if you don't want to see me, I'd like to see you. And of course, he followed me back into the office. Now, listen very carefully what happened. As he entered into the office, I locked the office door. I bolted it with key. I removed the key. I put it in my pocket. And my first instinct was to go into my drawers and open and see if nothing is missing. But when I opened the drawers, all the money there is gone. Now, I was simply acting based on intuition, based on instinct. I had no idea. I did not see anything. Now, the guy, seeing that the door has been locked, and he knew perfectly well that I did not see him. But now was confused, and he had no choice but to bring out all the money he had stolen. Now, this is intuition, perfectly based on the spiritual awakening of the senses, of the higher faculties. You cannot in any way explain that by science. So there
Yes,
are a
you
lot
can.
of things that we cannot explain by science. Tell me, how do you explain that by science?
That's really easy, actually. It's just called induction. Like people, people steal stuff, and if they come into your room and they came to talk to you, presumably, and they say they don't actually want to talk, it's very suspicious. If they do something suspicious, you can then check to see if your wallet's been stolen. I check to see if my wallet's been stolen when I sleep at the bus stop all the time. And then if someone tried to steal it, I would then stop them to see if they stole my money. None of that is magical or unscientific. That's just induction. Like we see these patterns in human beings all the time. So if you suspect someone of being suspicious, you stop them. And that's what cops do. It's just literally what cops do their entire job. None about that is suspicious. You mentioned reincarnation. As far as I know, reincarnation, near-death experiences, none of those have ever been scientifically confirmed. It's just imaginary. Like no one's ever shown those actually true. It's just stories people have made up or imagined, like dreams. So there's no evidence those are real other than just something people made up in their head. So if you could actually show that those happened to a scientific community, that would be great evidence, but those have never been shown to be real. Death is real, but has nothing to do with God. Like I agree that there are lots of things in reality, like this chair. This is a real chair. The fact that I believe this chair does not mean I believe in God, just because you think God is everything. Like because there's lots of things that I don't believe in. Like I don't think God is conscious. There is no consciousness. There is no spirit. There is no soul. That part that you believe God exists does not exist. It's just imaginary, something in our head. So just because I believe this chair exists does not mean I believe God exists. And so just I believe death exists does not mean I believe God exists for the same reason. So you can continue.
You amaze me because you see many things which are actually astonishing. You said you don't believe in consciousness. May I ask you, the words that are forming in your mouth, do you have any scientific explanation how words are being formed and languages are being formed? Can you explain that by science?
Yes. So I believe in my consciousness. I believe in your consciousness. I believe in
I'm
Josh's
talking
consciousness.
about the words that are in your mouth. Do you know how they're formed?
Yes, through the larynx, through the sound of the air, through compression of the air, it causes vibrations. The vibrations then translate into our eardrums. The eardrums create sound. That's how they are produced through science.
And that's how they produce different languages?
Different languages are produced by different people's imagination. There are lots of made up languages like Klingon, Elvish, Dwarvish. Languages are just things made up by people to make associations. There's nothing special about it. You can make computer languages, Visual C++, Java, Linux. Languages are just a visual representation of some kind of a symbol that represents something else, and that's it. Languages are just imaginary.
So I can see that you're very expert at making a simplistic explain everything, but that does not really answer the question. What's supposed to make you feel awe and reverence? What's supposed to make you to marvel about God's existence? You reduce them to simplistic explanation. That does not change the fact that actually most things which are beyond our explanation, most things that are beyond our control, these things are the real living God.
I
Because we have
agree
many
with you
things.
there. So yeah,
Sure, so I'm glad.
there's many things we can't explain, But the fact that we can't explain it isn't evidence of a God. So, for example, in science, like we can't explain dark matter and dark energy. Those are things in the universe we can't explain. But the fact that we can't explain it isn't evidence of a God, because it could just be explained by something later that's purely natural that we just didn't discover yet. So anything we don't know, maybe it's God, or maybe it's just a natural thing that isn't God. The fact that we don't know something isn't evidence of a God. But yes, many people believe because they think something we don't know is evidence of a God. It's called an argument from ignorance, or a God of the gaps fallacy, where you say, we can't explain this, therefore God. That's literally a God of the gaps fallacy.
You have a name for it, God of the gap fallacy. But taste call this faith in God. And even in your scientific jargons, a lot of things are also based on faith. You also have faith before you, like you rightly mentioned, there are things you cannot explain, but they are part of sciences. So why do you accuse the taste believing when you also have dark matter, etc., which your science cannot explain? So this is faith. So faith are evidences of what we cannot see, but we can understand. Like the Bible says,
Wait. I don't.
a fool conclude that there's no God because he cannot see from the created things the hand of God. You have to be able to see through. We don't see air, but we see air blowing when it affects objects. But you cannot see through the created things. We can see the hand of God. So you don't say that you don't believe because you cannot explain it, but that is not the evidence that God exists. That is just your way of reducing everything into simplistic explanation. But you have
Wait.
to be serious to understand the subject of God is not meant for everybody to understand. That's why I'm asking you before. Let me finish. That's why I'm saying that before you have any degree at school, before you have any qualification at school, there is a teacher, professor who says that you are qualified. So when it comes to spiritual matter, also you have to understand that there are things that you have to submit to spiritual teachers, because they also have the standard of existing. So if for instance, you want to see God, I see God every day. I see God every day. I interact with God every day. But if I show God to you, you cannot see because you don't have the eyes. You have to start from the rudiments. You have to be able to go through my procedure. You have to submit to me to be my student. Then you can see what I can see. But if you're refusing and you're rebelling, so how can you be a good student? You have to be a good student first to accept my rules of how to see God. All what you're saying as scientific jargons, which have not to even prove anything beyond what is already there. What is already there. That's
Okay,
my point.
let's give TJump the reply to that. Welcome to Togo, Africa. TJump, over to you.
Yeah, so you specifically said there are many things we don't know, and that's why we believe in God. That's not my words. That's your words, and that's the definition of a God of the gaps fallacy. So we know that doesn't work. That is not a good way to form beliefs, because we know that kind of forming beliefs, like you said earlier, if it fails a lot, then we can't trust it. So we know that kind of thinking fails a lot. In fact, it always fails. So we can't trust it. You mentioned that I have to submit to you to be a student. This is what science does, is that we have the teachers write papers. They say, if you follow this steps, and you can get this result. So they're the teachers, they give you a paper, and then you become the student, you read the paper and reproduce the results. So if you think you have some kind of a method to show God exists, you could publish it in a scientific paper, and the scientists can then repeat your steps to get the same results, to show that what you're saying is true, or they could show it's false by saying you can't get the same results. So what science does is they want to be your student. They want to say, if you have a method that you can show your beliefs are true and not imaginary, then you need to publish it in a paper, and we will be your student. We will follow those steps step by step to show you, to test to see if that is correct or not correct. And that's how science shows things are true. It doesn't just show things that are true now. Like, there are many things that science demonstrates that we can't see. We can't see neutrinos. Neutrinos are too small to see, but we can see their effects with indirect observation. We know the Big Bang is true. We can't see the Big Bang, but we can see its effects with indirect observation. Science shows us lots of things that we can't directly see, and that's perfectly fine. We can't see dinosaurs. We can't see a T-Rex, but we can see its fossils. So we can see the effects, even if we can't directly see what caused it. So science shows us lots of things that we can't see, but what science does really well is it shows what are the true things and what are the imaginary things. If you can't scientifically show what your belief is, then it's probably just in your imagination and not in reality.
Big Bang is true, even though you cannot see it. So, in the natural theology, uh, if you claim that Big Bang is true, the universe, and you believe that even though you don't see it, I would like to see a demonstration. And if it's not even a demonstration, an actual situation today where there has been Big Bang and life comes from that. When there is Big Bang, there's only destruction. Where have you seen life coming from destruction? And even then, if it happens to come from destruction, does order come from bang? Do you see order coming from Big Bang? There's only chaos when there's Big Bang. When there's explosion, there's only chaos. I've been following the news. You've seen the Big Bang that went in Beirut recently. You see the amount of chaos going on. So how come that your scientific evidences believe in such a fallacious theory that from a bang, the order and there will be life? Can you please make yourself clear?
Sure. So the Big Bang wasn't an explosion. That's just a term we use. What it was an expansion. All that there was just a bunch of particles that just expanded. And so the Big Bang didn't create order. The order was just in the laws, gravity, the weak force, the electromagnetic force. Those things already existed. They weren't caused by the Big Bang. And those things caused the particles to coalesce and grow together to build stars. And then the stars crushed the hydrogen atoms to make larger atoms like oxygen, and then the stars exploded to create lithium and heavier atoms, and the heavier atoms bonded together to create more complicated atoms. And then we got things like water and earth, and then the water and the earth combined together to get proteins, and proteins combined together to get DNA. So the Big Bang didn't cause order. The Big Bang is just a bunch of particles that separated into the space. And then through millions, billions of years of them coalescing together, that's what caused order. Like if you have water dripping down a mountain, eventually the water is going to tear the mountain down and create order from long enough periods of time. So it was the forces that created the order, not the Big Bang. The Big Bang is just a bunch of particles flowing off into space.
That laws already existed. The law of gravity existed, and all the laws existed in nature. My dear
Yes.
sir,
Yes.
when you talk about law, have you ever seen law being made by itself anywhere? I mean, you say you're scientific, but I just see that you are, in fact, I don't want to name it. Did you ever see law that is self-made? Give me an example of law that is self-made. Because from what we can see, we can understand what we see. So if you say something,
yes, there are.
If you say something,
there are laws that are
so where? How come this law made by who?
The law of identity.
You have to change. You have to change. You have to change that word law. What we know as law is that it is made and it is put into place by somebody. And you're talking about law, but you are refusing the explanation of what law means. So your semantics are actually just to look for followers, but you're actually not making sense in your statement. Because I've never seen law that is ever self-made. Law has to be made by somebody.
Laws are descriptions of things that exist. They're not made by anybody. So the law of identity is A equals A.
Law is not a description, please. Law is not description. I give you one example of a natural law of karma, law of consequences. If you do this, if you throw a stone, it comes back to you. You throw water on the ground, you're going to on a wet ground. Every action has a correction. That much you understand. That is a law that is observable. So now you don't say that law is a description of what exists. Law is actually the law of cause and effect, of action and reaction. This is what we call law. If you break any law in a civil society, there's a consequence for that. If you murder somebody, you're going to be killed by that. That's a law. It was formed by a society of people. So when you say law, it is something that is being made to exist for the normal function of human lives. You know, you cannot just start using word and then attributing other meaning to them. When you law, then you have to understand the law has to be made by somebody. Otherwise, change your terminology. It is no longer law. So if you believe that there are
No.
natural laws of order, that means that there is an authority. You just now
Okay,
No.
I give
let's
you an
just
example.
let's just
I
stay with
just want
that.
to end with this.
Wait,
I
wait.
want to end with this. I want to end with this. Now,
Okay.
wait a minute. I enter into New York. My first visit to New York, and I see so many traffic lanes. I see traffic lights. I see policemen. I see restaurants. I see many places, and a lot of people moving back and forth. But there's no vehicles are moving back and forth, but there's no commotion. People are not running into each other. This order come to place by itself. I will be a bushman to think that things are just running in New York without authority, without order being placed by somebody. That is your thinking. It's your way of thinking, and I have to follow that. No, I'm not that stupid. I have a little sense in my head to understand that when there is order, that means there is an authority that is overseeing that. You understand, and that's why I'm saying you cannot understand God. It's beyond you. You have to first understand what are visible and the created things made by God. Then only you can make understanding God. But where you are now, you're very far from
Okay,
that.
let's go to TJump to talk about law and the the etymology, the definition here. It sounds like there might be a conflation of a couple of different things. TJump, what have you got to
Sure.
say about that?
So I just went to the Stanford Encyclopedia, typed in scientific law definition, pressed enter, scientific laws or laws of science are statements based on repeatable experiments or observations that describe or predict a range of natural phenomenon. Scientific laws are descriptions of things that exist. They aren't created by anybody. They're describing things. We can prove this because there's laws like the law of identity. The law of identity states that a thing is itself. So if Vishnu or Hare Krishna exists, Hare Krishna is Hare Krishna. So it obeys the law of identity. So the law of identity is a thing is itself. So if Hare Krishna exists, Hare Krishna is Hare Krishna. Now, who made that law? Nobody. It predates anything because it's just saying a thing is itself. Another law would be the law of excluded middle. A thing is itself and not itself, or law of non-contradiction. And so these laws are laws of logic. These were not like created by anybody. They're just describing things that exist. Reality is a law, not created by anybody. Laws in science are not created. They describe reality. Laws in society are created, like legal laws. Legal laws are arbitrary. We can make whatever we want. Don't chew gum is a law in Singapore. It doesn't describe reality. It's not about the real world. The law of gravity is about the real world, which means we didn't make it. It's objective. It's true, independent of what anybody thinks. So that's the difference. Is the laws we make are subjective. Laws made by people or made by minds are arbitrary. You can make them whatever you want. Laws made by nature are objective. They cannot change. They apply to everyone, like the law of identity, law of non-contradiction, law of excluded middle, law of gravity, law of thermodynamics. Those laws do not change. Those are objective, so they describe the way reality is. But you don't have to take my word for it. You can just Google any scientific paper definition of scientific law. It's going to tell you the same thing. Laws for science are descriptive, not prescriptive.
We're not hearing you just yet, Varaha Prabhu. I'm muting your mic while TJump is speaking because there's a lot of background noise where you are. And then maybe it's still muted at your end. And you're back.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Right. So what you just said, that these are not scientific laws, because you've made a distinction between man-made laws and natural laws. That man-made law can be changed, but natural laws cannot be changed. And that is why they are considered natural laws, because they are ordered by God, by some superior authority. It's beyond your power to change that. The man-made laws based on needs and whatever. You can go into the parliament and change it and make a new law. But then just to recognize that there's some superior authority that you tamper with is decision. That is why there are laws of cause and effect, law of karma. Whatever bad thing you do, you're going to reap that. Whatever you sow, you're going to reap that. This is natural law. This is law of karma. Now, I don't know how morally astute you are, but what gives you your moral conduct? On what basis do you know what is right and what is wrong? What determines what is good and what is evil for you? When you do not believe that you have consciousness, or even if you believe that there is consciousness, if you say there is consciousness and you are not conscious of what is right and what is wrong, or what is evil or what is good, how do you become conscious of that? So when you understand that, for instance, even in the city, in the society, human society, we respect laws because we know that it's put, so we respect them. So the same thing applies to natural, some superior authority that put these natural laws there. You cannot taunt them, you cannot circumvent them. If you do anything that is against the law of nature, you're bound to reap that. So you have to understand that.
No, again, the law of identity. The law of identity is a law in logic. It says a thing is itself. So for someone to put that law into place, it would have to not be itself and then put the law into place and be itself, which is a problem. So how could Hare Krishna not be itself and then put the law into place to make it itself? It doesn't make any sense. So, I mean, I'm a moral realist, so I believe in objective morality like most philosophers who are mostly atheists. You don't need a God for objective morality. Morality is just a feature of nature, like a law of nature, like gravity, so you can know it perfectly well without a God. But again, we know laws are not put into place because the thing that put them into place must have already been obeyed by laws. So to put laws into place, you have to already be subject to other laws, so it leads to an infinite regress. Therefore, the laws themselves have to predate anything else, like the law of identity. A thing is itself. So if God exists, the God is itself before it existed. Therefore, it can't have created the law. The law has to predate the God.
Anyway, you seem to have your own logic, but in ordinary common sense, we know that the king is above the law. The king made the law and is beyond is the law in any country. So that is what is logic. But all the other things you're saying, that you can only understand yourself. But just common sense shows that king can be above the law. So what are you talking about? It has to be beside, before, and before. I mean, all that is some jargon. It's common sense, plain common sense, that king is beyond the law. So God is the greatest king. So he is above the law. That is common sense, my dear. It does not have to be science. It doesn't need science. It's common sense.
Okay, do you have something to say about that, TJump? Could you just mute your mic, please, Varaha Prabhu?
Okay.
We're still getting a lot of sound from Togo.
Right. Okay, now.
We're still hearing it. I think there's a button on the screen that you can click.
Yeah, if you have a keyboard, you can just press the M button.
Okay, you can press the M button on the keyboard. That'll mute the mic.
Tell me again.
Varaha, can you press the M button on your keyboard, please? M for mute. Yep, M for
Are the keyboards in Togo in English?
M. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. Right.
Okay, I'm gonna mute it at this end. The problem with muting it at this end is it takes a couple of seconds for it to hit the stream. Boom. TJump.
All right. So again, law of identity. The law of identity says a thing is itself. That's one of the laws of science. And so if it was created by a god, I'll get it again. But if the law of identity was created by a god, that means it had to not be a law first. So like if you have a king, and a king creates the law of being a king, well, he couldn't have been a king before the law. So you can say like the first king would have had to have created the law of kings to become a king. So he couldn't have been a king before he created the king law, right? So then we have the same kind of thing with the law of identity. A thing is itself, means God is God. If that law was created by God, then God couldn't be God before he created the law, because then it would only be true after it was created. So the law can't be created, because if it was created, then the thing that created it couldn't be itself. Does that make sense? I'm going to mute him.
Okay. Bringing you back in. We're just waiting for the sound to hit the stream. I wonder if it's muted at your end now, Varaha.
It's not muted on my side.
Yep. We
got you.
Are you hearing me?
Yep, we can hear you. Can you hear us?
Okay, fine. Yeah, sure.
Did you hear my
Are we
argument that in order? Yeah, we're back. Did you hear my argument that in order for something to create a law, it has to exist? And so if it is itself, that itself is a law, and so it couldn't have created that law?
You see, what you fail to understand is that God himself is the reality. It doesn't have to be created. Can't you understand that? What we call God is that which causes itself. So you also have to understand the definition of the theistic definition. We are not the one who have to understand you all the time. You have to also understand this basic fact that that which we call God is the self-evident reality, which does not need to be created. If it is created, then it's no longer God. Can't you understand that? Why is it easy for you to understand your own imaginary talks rather than understanding the theistic evidence that that which has no beginning, that which has no other reality except itself, that is God? Understand that also. It's important. That is why I said you need to be in the school of devotion, the school, theistic school, to learn, because this argument is going back and forth, because you're not going to yield. It's like trying to wake up somebody who is pretending to be asleep. Even when you're faced with real evidence, you try to make some word juggery to turn around it. But the facts are there. You can't run away from it. So you have to either admit that, of course, there are things you do not understand, and it is not only you. It is mentioned clearly in every theistic literatures that understanding of God is not meant for everybody, because those who want to forget him, God also allows them to forget him. That is what is called free will. So you want to be dumb to knowing this fact about God, it makes you dumb. It gives you all the reason to be dumb. And if you want to wake up to knowledge, then it gives knowledge. That is what he says. So you have to understand this. Unless you are admitted to theistic school, you can this fact. And there's no way you have to make me understand what you're trying to force down my throat. All these jargons about, something has to be there first. Whatever is there first, that is what we call God. Point.
Okay. That's the point there. Whatever is there first is what we call God, is the point that Varaha is making there with that
right.
statement.
So I'm not disagreeing with him, but he's he has a problem with his worldview. So his worldview, he says that laws are created, that something has to create a law. But there is a law called the law of identity. This is a law in science that a thing is itself. So this law, if it was created, it had to have been created by something. But if that something created it, then that something could not be itself before the law existed. That would be a problem because then the law must have existed before the creator of the law. So if the law was created, the thing who created it couldn't be itself before it created the law. That's a problem. So again, the law of identity is a law. And if what he's saying is true, that all laws had a creator, then the creator couldn't exist because one of the laws is the creator has to exist. That's a law. So if that law was created, then the creator doesn't exist because it couldn't have existed before it created the law.
What about the second point that he made? I got that there. That might have been more like an analogy. The second point he made was that those laws are less like a created law and more like a necessary kind of aspect of reality.
All right. So I agree the laws predate anything. The laws describe the way things are. So no one created the laws. That's the point, is that the laws were not created. They describe reality. So if I'm fine with that, that's the same with my worldview. But if he's claiming that laws are created, then that's a problem because this law kind of has to predate anything. It can't have been created. It's a necessary law. Things are themselves a necessary law. So it couldn't be created because then that would cause a problem because the creator, whoever created it, couldn't exist. It couldn't be itself.
Okay, let me unmute Varaha's mic for the... I don't know whether it takes a couple of seconds for your mic to re-unmute when I unmute you at this end, Varaha, but we're not hearing you right now. And now we can hear you.
Okay, so you're talking about laws which have to be there or which are not created. I think, or it's not even thinking, it's a fact that whatever we are doing here on earth, whatever a man is doing, whatever we're doing in human society, that is a replica of higher truth. That is a replica. I mean, what we call the invisible world is this material world is like a reflection of that world. So there's nothing we're doing here which is actually original. It's a reflection of other realities. Okay. Your science is still saying that only earth is habited, but the spiritual science have made us know that all the planets are habited, even up to the sun. They are in. So your science still way back in finding out truth. So now I'm trying to let you know that whatever we're doing here is a reflection of other realities. So we make laws, and when we make laws, people know there is an authority behind the law. Even though people know this, they still flaunt the laws. They still disobey the laws. And when the consequences come, that is when they become conscious that there is an authority. Otherwise, everyone would just love to do what he likes. There, nobody made law. Did you live in America like nobody made law? If everyone lives like there's no one who made law, there will be chaos. So can't we just get this common sense that if we humans were intelligent enough that when we make laws, it is backed up by authority? Now you're saying that the laws in the universe are not backed up by authority? That's what you want me to believe?
So is
that your logic?
This is a great point here. I think earlier, TJump, you said that there is some basis for objective morality for atheist philosophers, and I think this really speaks to what Varaha is pointing to here. Like, what is the basis for that objective morality that you claim, if it's not God?
Well, yeah, but that's I still want to go to this point. So he says that laws are enforced by an authority. So did God create the law of identity? Can God change the law of identity? And does God obey the law of identity? Those are my three questions.
Do you know how many times you've changed since you were born into this world? Show me your picture when you are 5 years old. I wouldn't be able to see that it's the same Trump that is before me right now. And if you grow older, when you will be 80 years old, I won't even be able to recognize you again. Can't you see that God is changing the law of identity? And when you leave this body, you're going to take another body. It can be animal body. It can be body, angelic body. That is also changing of identity. So while we're living, we're changing our identity. You have the identity of a child. You have identity of a youth. You're going to have an identity of an old man. Who is changing that? And then you say that there's no changing law of identity. It's changing right in front of you. So unless you want to believe what you want to believe, but yes, we can see that the law of identity is being changed because the person who responded as a child in a divination, many years later on is going to respond as an adult. Identity has changed, my dear.
So the law of identity doesn't say that change can't happen. It just says a thing is itself. So like at any one particular time, a thing
You
is
ask
itself.
me, your question is whether God can change the law of identity.
Yeah.
And I said, yes, it is changing every day. And it's even after you leave this body. The law is there. Excuse me. The hinos me yata de he kumaram yuanam jara tata de han tara property. Dira satra namu yati law. As embodied soul passes from in this body from boyhood to youth to old age, in the same way, when he leaves this body, he's going to take another body. So the wise they're not disturbed by that change. This is the law. I'm describing the law to you. You understand the language of this law, but because I'm a taste and I understand the laws, the religious, theological laws, I'm speaking them to you. But you see, unless you're a student, how can you understand? You are not. You're just a rebel.
If I can jump in there, I can hear like a misimpedance match there. So the identity, the law of identity that TJump that you're talking about, when you apply it to this this idea from Bhagavad Gita that the body is constantly changing, but you remain the same person. You were once 5 years old, now you're however old you are. But you're still the same person. There's some part of you that remains you, and in which sense we say that it's the same person, even though all those details have changed, and it's that thing that hasn't changed that's the identity. And so the law of identity from logic, as you're pointing it out, is that a thing is itself. It's an interesting question that you ask about whether the law of identity can be changed, and I don't want to influence the direction of the debate too much, but perhaps Varaha, when you come back to speaking about this, it is something in Vaishnava philosophy which is simultaneous oneness and difference, identity and the change of identity. TJump, you got look like you want to respond to what Varaha Prabhu was saying.
No, I think you got it pretty well. He's misunderstanding the law of identity in philosophy is not the identity of change. Those are two different things. So I agree that people can change and get older. That's totally fine. Like there's no problem there. What identity means is that an object is itself at this one time and no other time. So it doesn't matter if it changes in the future. At this one time, it is itself. So can God be himself and not be himself at the same time? That would be what it means to change the law of identity.
Okay.
God can exist and not exist.
Now, if God did exist, he would have to be able to change that. Am I right? Be himself and not be himself at the same time. Otherwise, he'd just be an ordinary guy like you and me. I'm just bringing your microphone back in, Varaha. We got you. We can hear the sweet sounds of Togo.
Right. Okay. I mean, it's a bit quiet now. I mean, when you say that I miss the understanding, no. Because he asked him, who is he? So if he's a consciousness, if he knows that it's a spirit soul, then of course the identity of spirit soul doesn't change because it's part of the eternal. That never changes. The existence, there's no change. But he does not even understand who he is. He thinks that it's a combination of chemicals. And this combination of chemicals, at one point, everything will dissolve. So that is why I'm saying, what is his identity? If his identity is a combination of chemical, but we see that the combination of chemical is changing. That which does not change, he has no knowledge about that. That which does not change, he does not know it. He does not know that identity that you are talking about. Because if we're on that page, then we all know that that which does not change as an origin of what does not change, what is ever existing, eternal, undying. That is the one that never changes. And we are part of that. So he doesn't understand that. So how can I say that his law of identity is attainable? It is not attainable idea. It is fallacious, because what is he? It's just a combination of chemicals is going through changes. So his identity does not remain the same. But if you understand the science of the soul, if you understand the science of the soul, and that the soul is eternal and is part of an eternal being, then we can talk on the same page of the identity which never changes.
Okay, so I'm going to give TJump the right of reply to that, and then we're coming up to the last portion of this discussion, this debate, and we're getting a lot of questions in the chat about morality. People want to talk about the objective basis of morality. So maybe after your reply, TJump, we can move on to that subject to speak to some of those questions.
Yeah, so he said there's the thing that does not change. So if there's something that does not change, it's obeying a law. It's obeying the law that it cannot change. That law is called the law of identity. A thing is itself. It is identical to itself. So I'm talking about that kind of identity, the kind that is unchanging. So if there is a thing that cannot change, then there is a law that governs that thing, and that law is the law that stops it from changing. So that law has to exist before the thing to stop it from changing. Otherwise, there's no law, or it's going to change. So the only reason it can't change is because there is a law that exists before it to stop it from changing, which means the law has to exist before the thing that doesn't change, or it would change. So the problem here is that if you think a God exists who doesn't change, then the law of the unchanging has to exist before the God, because if the God created it, that's a change. And so it had to change.
Okay. TJump's found his groove. He's banging on it. Okay, let's move on from this point here, right? Identity. We can agree to disagree on this one. Let's move on to this question of objective morality, because people are it's going nuts in the chat. Let's have a look here. What do we got? What determines morality? What determines what is moral or not for you?
Yeah, sure. So morality is a law of nature, just like any other law of nature. Morality is a higher order emergent property, kind of like fitness. Fitness is the fact that animals can survive in more environments than others. So fitness is an objective property of reality that's true, independent of our opinion. Morality is the same kind of a thing, but instead of fitness, which describes how organisms can survive in environments, morality describes the comparison of how agents interact in an environment. So it's an objective property of the world. It's kind of like a law, like gravity. It exists objectively, like any natural law does, no problem.
Okay. Let me bring Varaha back in. I didn't actually quite get that argument myself, but maybe I'm just slow.
Well, I mean, you accept gravity as objective, right?
Yeah.
So morality is like gravity. It's a law of nature.
I've never seen a formula or a scientific paper about that. People are saying something about the Euthyphro dilemma.
Yeah, the youth. Were you trying to say something? Varaha, were you saying something?
Yes, sure. I know what I'm on.
You're on.
Fine. Does anyone fear the law of gravity?
Yes.
Some of these laws do you fear it? There's no fear. You can fall down, and you just simply fall down. There's no fear. You're not being obsessed with fears. But moral laws, I mean, if I'm sitting and in your wallet, there are so many words of thousands of dollars, and what stops me from taking that money?
All the Benjamins.
What is law of gravity? Is that law of gravity? You can't stop it. Anything goes up, comes down. But my instinct not to take your money is that what is the gravity there? I can choose to take it, and I can choose not to take it. But it has to be some sense of morality based on certain fear of consequences of what I'm going to do, what I'm doing. But if you feel that there's no authority that is enforcing laws, then how can anyone respect any law? There will be chaos. Please come on, explain
Law
better.
of Smith and Wesson.
Yeah, pretty much. So, yeah, morality is true independent of an authority. So, it's wrong to kill someone regardless of whether or not there's an authority. So, you don't need an authority for it to be wrong. Like if you have two universes, one with a god and one without a god, and someone kills someone else in both universes, it's wrong in both universes. So, moral and immoral is true independent of an authority. It doesn't matter if there's an authority there. Something is good or evil regardless of the authority, and regardless of whether or not you are punished, and regardless of whether or not you feel fear. None of those matter to morality. Morality is a measure of whether or not it's an imposition on someone's will without their consent. It doesn't matter if it's good, if it gives you something, like you can kill someone and take their money, that would still be immoral. You can kill someone without a god, that would still be immoral. It doesn't make a difference. Authorities make no difference. What you feel makes no difference. Morality and immorality are true independent of feelings or authority.
No, independent of authority.
Oh, it's gone muted. I still don't get what this objective morality is. Like, what a dog steals something food from my house or something. How is that immoral for a dog or a human? Like, it seems like morality is only something that would apply to human beings.
It depends on your model of morality. So no, my model of morality applies to all conscious things. So it would apply to anything like animals, conscious agents, psychopaths, whatever, aliens, all conscious things, not just animals. Any involuntary imposition of will would be immoral. So like if a dog stole some food for you, that would be immoral, yes, in my worldview. But in many moral views, that's not the case. So it only applies to agents. It depends on which moral theory you think is true and which one corresponds to reality.
Varaha, we have your microphone back.
Right. So it still doesn't explain the free will. What cautions not to do evil act? What cautions me? In fact, let's leave morality aside. Let him explain to us what is order. What brings order? What puts people in check? Why people are not simply going berserk and doing what they like? It thinks that morality does not to do with authority. Can you explain what is order? What's order in place? Let him give us an explanation. Because I don't see why people don't go berserk and doing what it is, because there is an authority. It is because there is some punishment. It is because there's going to be some consequence. Otherwise, you'll be living in a jungle, my dear. So you have to understand what is order. Does he understand what is order? Let him explain what is order. How does it come about?
Okay.
Authority.
Okay, let's let him explain that. TJump, do you believe in order or do you believe in the jungle?
Yes, there is order. It's a result of socioeconomics and social animals. Like you can look at every animal species, they all have order because they all have a social hierarchy and rules they follow that help them to survive. The ones that did not have order died, and so that's why we don't see any of those today, because they're all dead. So evolution produced order because the ones that cooperated and had a social order survived, and the ones that didn't died. That's why we have order. It has nothing to do with an objective morality. You don't need objective morality to cause people to feel things. People feel things because of evolution. Regardless of what we feel, objective morality is true. Like if we didn't feel gravity, it would still be there. The fact that we feel something doesn't matter to whether or not there is an objective truth. Those two are independent things.
And what's this Euthyphro thing that people are talking about?
The Euthyphro dilemma is a dilemma from Socrates when he was about to be executed, and Euthyphro came and had a conversation with him, and he asked, "What is piety? Well, how can we tell what is essentially moral and immoral? What is morality?" And Euthyphro said, "Well, it's based on the gods. The gods give us morality," kind of like what your position is. And Socrates said, "Well, that doesn't work, because is something moral because God said it's moral? Or did God say it was moral because it's moral based off of an independent standard?" So if it's only true because God said it's moral, then it's arbitrary and there is no such thing as morality. It's just made up. But if God said it's true because it's moral based on a different independent standard, then you don't need God. You can just measure morality based off of the independent standard. Therefore, it's impossible to have morality based on a God. It only works if there is an independent standard other than God that you can measure against to determine morality. That's the Euthyphro dilemma.
Okay, we're just waiting for your mic to come back, Varaha. And in 5, 4, 3, I'm guessing, 2, 1. Still not yet. And now we're live from Togo, Africa. Please go ahead, Varaha.
Okay, so I'm trying to respond to what he said, that morality can exist without God. But actually, the scripture says wisdom is the fear of God. Being experiences pain, you know that if you do me something, you cause me harm, you hurt me, I'm going to feel pain. But still, you go ahead to do it anyway. So, how can people be moral, independent of authority? You know that if you steal, you're going to be punished. You go ahead and steal anyway. So, how can morality be independent of authority? You say many, but we don't see these things in reality. We don't see this in everyday life. So, if somebody can be moral without an authority or without the fear of authority, then there should be no need for prison. There should be no need for police station. How come there's so much money being spent on security? Well, everyone could be moral. In fact, I was going to ask Tom, if the majority of the world are atheists and only very few people are God conscious, what kind of world do you think we're going to have?
A better one. Like most, if we look at...
You're enjoying the world way just because there is fear of God and there is some authorities in place. Your world where there will be no authority, your world morality depends on, it's independent of authority, it's going to be chaos. Definitely.
Okay, let's let TJump respond to that. Would you like to live in a godless world, TJump, you atheist?
Yeah, we can actually look at other societies that don't have a God. We can see there are many countries that are mostly non-religious, that don't have any religion at all, that have mostly atheists, and they're the best countries in the world. Norway, Sweden, Denmark, Germany, like they all have better healthcare, better security, less crime, less violence, more healthy people, longer life expectancies, longer marriages, happier lives. Literally everything about their society is better when you don't have a God. Japan is another one. Japan has essentially non-religious, they're technically Buddhist in a lot of cases, but really not really religious. Most non-religious societies are better, with a few exceptions like China, and Russia is actually mostly Christian, so that would be mostly religious. But most non-religious societies are the best societies in the world. So yeah, those are the ones we should probably live in. Again, morality is independent of authority. If you kill someone, it's wrong even if there's no God. It's still wrong. It doesn't become not wrong just because there's no God. It's wrong because you're hurting someone without their consent. So you don't need a God for morality at all. And it can be true independent of God, just like facts, just any other facts. Like I'm 6'2". That fact is true even if there's no God. You don't need authority. It's just true because it corresponds to reality. So morality can be true because it corresponds to reality. You don't need a God, just like you don't need a God to tell me I'm 6'2".
Okay, no problem. Let us even say, for argument's sake, that morality is independent of God. Are you hearing me?
Yes.
Are you hearing me?
Yep.
Right. Okay. So let us admit that for argument's sake. So, Mr. Tom, you have a and I'm just thinking that, if I'm with your wife and I do some, I your wife, You may say that that is immoral, but I might ask you, on what basis? Who says it? Who says that it's moral? It's just my free will. I just want to enjoy it. So who, by what standard you say it's immoral? Tell me.
Uh, based off of the laws of consent. So if she does not consent, then it would be an involuntary imposition of will, and so it would break the law that is moral law. It's like with the law of gravity. You break the law.
And she consents, Bible or religious books call that adultery. But to you, I mean, it's just independent of God, so there's no adultery. I mean, I can do whatever I like with your wife.
So if we agree to that kind of relationship, yeah, that's called polygamy. Polygamy is a thing. Polyamory is a thing. So if you agree to that kind of relationship,
no, this is not polygamy. This is not polygamy. It's me going with your wife. I'm not marrying her. It's your legally married wife.
Yeah, it's called polyamory. So polyamory is having multiple sexual partners, and that is perfectly not immoral. So it's perfectly fine if you agree to it. If all the parties involved agree, it's not immoral.
So do you see what I'm suggesting? When we live in a world that is godless, you can see how much, immorality will be there. Actually, we don't want that kind of world. We want where people can be, conscious of authorities and conscious of not trespassing their limits. You understand? The scripture says, "Isavasyam idam sarvam." Everyone as his own. That is the law of nature, and it's put there by God. So, Isavasyam principle is that everyone has his own quota, and he should not encroach on others. That is law of God. And civil societies have also adopted that law. It's based on an authority. When there was anyone can encroach on another person's property. But society that you're talking about, they have, yes, but based on certain civilized principles. Because a civilized human being or civilized society is based on religious principles. The more people are backward and savage, that shows how much do not have principles in their life. So I would say, of course, Western society have evolved, but they're actually mostly culturally illiterate. Because when you go into setups, you go society that nations, they respect wholeheartedly these Savasian principles, the fact that you should not encroach on another person's property, knowing fully to whom they belong. But in your godless atheist society, if one exists, a Savasian principle cannot exist. It will not function because it is a free for all world. There's no fear of anyone not encroaching. You're just rightly saying now polyandry could be all right, but I wish it is, and then you will understand what that means. But because laws exist, that you're living peacefully with you. Otherwise, so many will come in and take your wife out. You will not even say you won. You see, what you're advocating is a chaotic society, godless society, civilized, animalistic, barbaric. Civilization means
polyamory is legal.
Civilization begins when there is God at the center.
Okay, drop the mic. Let's hand it over to TJump to respond to that.
So again, the most advanced, peaceful civilizations in the world are the ones that have the least religion, like France, where polyamory is legal and accepted. So most societies, like the Western societies, it's not criminalized, it's perfectly legal. When you get to morally advanced societies, you start to realize consent is really what makes something moral or immoral, not religious doctrine. So we know that actually polyamory isn't immoral at all. It's perfectly fine if everyone consents to it in the relationship, which is why it's allowed in many Western countries that are the most morally advanced and the most peaceful and the least criminal, because it's consensual. Consensual things are perfectly fine. So it seems like your religious text is actually morally backward and hasn't caught up to the moral advancedness of the secular humanist movement, which is more moral than your more religious text is.
Okay, interesting place to go to in this debate about does God exist, but the fans are asking for it. They want to know about morality and the basis for it. So here we are. And look, we're in the last 10 minutes of the debate now. So why don't we just take this moment now for each of you to make a closing summary statement about this debate, all of the topics that we've touched on, and the topic, does God exist? And so who would like to go first? TJump, I've got your mic hot right now.
Yeah, sure. So it was an interesting debate. Thanks for coming on. Thanks for inviting me. I appreciate Varaha for taking the time to have a conversation with me. It's probably pretty late where he is right now. So yeah, we talked about, does God exist? I don't think he provided really any evidence for it. Like, you need some way to differentiate imagination from reality. Science does that, but he seemed to focus more on intuition and personal experience, which we know are really, really unreliable methods. Science is a much more reliable method. Laws, we know, definitely are not created. Natural laws exist prior to anything else. That's why the law of identity is a thing. The Euthyphro dilemma brought up by the people in the chat shows that a God can't be a basis of objective morality. It's logically impossible, which is why most philosophers are not religious, but still objective morality. We don't accept God as a solution to objective morality in philosophy or ethics. So the more plausible solutions are things like moral naturalism. You can just go to the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy if you want to know more about the grounds of naturalistic morality, which is the consensus of the experts in philosophy right now, mostly atheists, mostly moral realists. And yeah, thanks again for having me on. Appreciate Varaha for taking the time to have a conversation, and I'll pass it over to him.
Awesome. Okay, I'm bringing your mic back on, Varaha. Let's just give it a second to warm up the internets from Togo, Africa. The internet cafe there. And we have hit 50 live viewers. The viewers were saying, hey, it's 49, make it 50, and we hit 50. So we've got 50 people watching now, plus the literally millions of people watching this in the future on the internet. You're unmuted at this end, Varaha. I'm not sure whether it's muted at your end. And you're live.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, we got you.
Can you? Right. I'm also very thankful, grateful for being on this program. And I also appreciate very much Tom's resilience against many proofs and evidence he's trying to deny. Of course, like I said, it's very difficult to wake up somebody pretending to be asleep. There are cumulative evidence, just like you go to court case and beyond every reasonable doubt, you are guilty. So beyond every reasonable doubt, God exists. That's why we exist. We do not exist on our own. We exist by the grace of God. And when we do not understand, when we live in an atheistic society that reduces everything to just chemicals, then the world becomes very, very immoral, a dangerous place to live, because they can terminate life anyhow. They can just do away with life. There's no respect for life. There's no respect for decency in situations whereby God is not considered. So we don't pray for that kind of world, and it never come to that because side by side the principles exist on nature. God allows, yes, free will for people to believe what they want, but at the same time, He gives us enough evidence of His existence, of His presence. He sent us prophets. He makes Himself available as avatar incarnations, and then through many other revelations. In the past, people have come to understand and know that God exists. The position of history in this argument of God's existence is also very important, because we learn many things from historical facts. From what, like he rightly agreed with me that he knew that is history. That is history. So we cannot deny history. In fact, we learned that the real forefather, the great grandfather, is the first to exist, and every other person has come. So I rest my case here, and I look forward to more participation in this. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you both. I acknowledge both of you for being up to having this conversation in the public square, if you will, the forum of the 21st century. You know, this is a conversation that has been going on as long as there have been human beings who've been able to speak and use language, discussing this topic. Does God exist, and what is the nature of God? What is moral? This kind of philosophical conversation. It's an eternal conversation, and it's an important conversation. And thank you to all of the viewers who have tuned in today and have been participating in this conversation. This is what it means to be a human being, because although, as TJump says, dogs and cats can be moral, they cannot be philosophical. At least I can't see any of them tuning into our YouTube stream today. So again, thank you very much to Varaha Prabhu for tuning in from Togo, Africa, late at night, and to TJump for tuning in from the somewhere mid-east coast, I think, of the United States of America in your Sunday afternoon. And is it Chicago, Illinois, where you are, TJump? Oh, you seem to be muted for some reason.
Yep, I muted myself there. I live in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Chicago is just the time zone.
Got it. Minneapolis, Minnesota. And thank you to all the viewers for tuning in from around the world, wherever you are, whatever time of the day that it is. Thank you for your patience, for your outrage, for your humorous quips, and for participating in this conversation and this series of conversations. Last word goes to Arpit Sarkar, who says that TJump's chair looks like the five-headed cobra sheltering Vasudev from the storm. It's a reference to one of the incarnations of Krishna. So even though you're an atheist, you reminded him of that. TJump's chair is becoming quite famous in its own right on the internet. Thank you very much, gentlemen. And I look forward to seeing and hearing both of you speaking in the public square in the future.
Very well.
Thanks.